Well, thank you, man, for spending time today with us. I've been probably more excited about this conversation than any, just because you're a longtime friend of mine, and I think I don't know, man. I always feel like I have the best conversations with people I know well, and
Yeah.
so anyway, thank you for coming on, man, and going
Thanks
through
for
the
having me.
trouble of hopping on the computer, and I know you're a busy dude, but welcome, man.
Thank you.
So I just obviously I can't assume everybody knows you as well as I do, and but I just wanted to start by talking about one of the reasons I wanted you to come on. Um, One, because you're since we were kids, like your opinion has always been one that I heeded and love to hear and has influenced me in the past.
I appreciate
Um,
that. Likewise, man.
and Number two, just because you accomplish great things. For anyone listening, um, he's a Navy SEAL. One of the hardest things to, the more I learned about what it takes to become a Navy SEAL, it sounds like one of the hardest things anybody can do, um, in the special forces in general. But once again, we've known each other since high school. He said back when I think he would have been maybe 16 years old, maybe 17, the first time, or 15, maybe the first time I heard it, that he was going to be a Navy SEAL, and had a long road to get there. Wasn't able to take the road that um, other people could take, for a number of reasons, but didn't let anything discourage him, and got it done. So anyway, um, if you don't mind, man, I just would love to start with, man, going back to when we first met and you deciding you wanted to be a Navy SEAL. What 15-year-old is like? People say shit like that,
Yeah,
right? But
sure.
they don't actually go do it,
Yeah,
right? When they're kids, you said it and you did it, which means you must have been way more convicted than all the other 15-year-olds who say stuff like that when they're 15, way more convicted than they actually were, because obviously in hindsight you did it. Where did that come from, man? Like, why were you so serious about it? Because I don't, uh, yeah, where did that come from?
yeah. I wish the origin story was a little more romantic, but I was 8 years old when I decided that this is what I wanted to do.
8 years old?
8 years old, yeah.
I didn't realize
And
that.
and for better or for worse, it is because of the movie Under Siege, which if you have seen Under Siege, it's pretty ridiculous. It's
I haven't even seen the movie, man. I'm gonna go
don't
back and watch.
don't
Don't.
bother, don't bother. It's a Steven Seagal flick.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, yes. Yeah, Casey Ryback. So I'm watching this movie with my dad, and you know, truth be told, I was always very interested in military and shooting guns,
Yeah.
and generally, if I were playing, I'd be playing out in the woods, and I'd be playing any one of these military guys in my head.
Hmm.
And then we watched Under Siege, and Casey Ryback is this lone Navy SEAL who got in some trouble, and now he has to be a cook on a ship.
Yeah.
Ultimately, he saves the day when this thing gets taken over by terrorists. But this dude is just kicking ass, man, throwing knives, making homemade explosives, doing all this wild stuff. And I said to my dad, I was like, Dad, who is this guy? And he's like,
Yeah.
oh, that's a Navy SEAL. So that from that moment on, I was like, this is what I got to do. Um,
So Steven Seagal,
yeah, yeah,
if we're
Steven
just
Seagal.
being real specific, Steven Seagal was
That was the
the
impetus.
moment.
Yeah, man.
That was the moment.
But uh, I'm sad to report I still do not know how to throw kitchen knives. It's not part of the deal.
I'm sure you don't need
I
to.
was I was let down a little bit on that front, but yeah, man. So that was kind of what spawned it, and then there was this is pre 9/11, right? So we didn't have all the video games, all the Call of Duty, all the movies about the teams, and none of that stuff. So
Yep.
I just began reading all the Vietnam era books, of which there were many, and there was the Red Cell stuff from Dick Marcinko, who founded SEAL Team Six, and he had a ton of books, and so
Yeah.
that's kind of what I was learning through, and then we were in 2000, 99, 2000, Budge Class 234 came out on Discovery Channel. Um, and
That's
that kind of,
class. Oh, that was like a special on the
yeah,
actual process of
it
becoming.
followed, yeah, it followed class 2, 3, 4 from, day one, week one, all the way through the 6 months of buds training. So, that was a way that I could kind of learn about what the initial selection process looked like and entailed. And yeah, I was head over heels. I was hooked. It was what I was going to do, come hell or high water. So
Well, and can you talk about two things? One is well, uh, the well, I guess the first thing. Well, yeah, first question would be, um, what you see it on TV. It's exciting. You're 8 years old. You're like, I want to do that, right? And then you obviously, as you get older, you start to dig into what this really entails, right? It's not as
yeah,
fun
yeah,
as just throwing kitchen knives and
right,
how you'd always snap people's neck,
yeah, yeah,
and so
yeah.
it's
That's
not as
not,
fun as just and once you realize what it's really about, and you still decide to do it, what is it about service, right? Because I know one thing I know about you is service in general is something that you already decided was for you, even before, when we were kids, or teenagers. What is it about that drew you to service in general?
yeah, yeah,
There has to be something greater than,
yeah.
can you walk me through that? Why?
For whatever reason, since I was very small, I've had a kind of an innate desire to be protective.
Mm,
And for whatever reason, I was never bullied, but I always had a very strong distaste for bullying.
mm,
Um, and I think, one of the things that I learned from my father is to be a protector.
mm,
Um, my dad was not military. Both my grandfathers were in World War II, and I certainly grew up with those stories. But I always viewed my father as a protector, and was kind of called to be that
mm.
as soon as I sort of understood what that meant to me. And when you're young, and you have ideas of those things, they change as you grow and mature.
Yep.
Um,
And you said your dad was in the service too?
no, my father was not in the
Your
service. So
grandfather?
both my grandfathers, yeah,
Yeah,
World
you
War
got it. Go
II.
ahead. Yep.
Yeah, one was a Marine, in the Pacific Theater. He was a POW for 3 years and 8 months.
Wow.
Yeah, and then my father's father flew in the Army Air Corps, so the predecessor to the Air Force,
Gotcha.
in the European theater, and he was a waist gunner. So I certainly grew up with some of those stories,
Yeah.
and those guys, the greatest generation didn't really talk
Ever.
about that stuff, so you kind of had to get it secondhand and kind of read about it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, for me, I always wanted to kind of to emulate that protector mindset. And I remember having a conversation because my mother really didn't want me to be in the
That was going to be my
military.
next question.
Yeah, really didn't want me to be in the military. And she had asked me, why you of all people, why, there's so many people, why do you have to be the one to go and do this?
Yeah.
My baby boy. And I remember thinking to myself and saying to her, why not me? Right? Like,
Hmm.
everybody that's going to go and do this job, whatever it is, that's somebody's baby boy. Like, you can't approach these difficult things in life with the mentality of, I should be, removed from stepping up to the table, right? Like,
Hmm.
you have to step up to the table in whatever facet that is, and it doesn't have to necessarily be military, right?
Yep. And that was kind of one of the reasons and the reason I asked is like, you know, you ever since I've known you, you've worked for everything you've earned, and but at the same time, like, some people join the military and some people become boxers because of extreme financial hardship, like, where they're, maybe grew up in, in a
Yeah,
bad neighborhood or so on and so
sure.
forth. You were, grew up in rural Indiana and back and forth between Chicago, and we both went to what I think was a very good school, but more importantly, you were, uh, got good grades, did well in sports. Long story short, you could have, played. You could have leveraged either your academic excellence or your athletic excellence to go on to get into whatever college you wanted. You could have got into the science field, become an entrepreneur. You actually are an entrepreneur and started the business. There's a lot of different things you could have done to
Yeah.
sustain yourself and build wealth and so on and so forth. But you still decided, I want to be on the front line, right? So I always felt
Yeah.
there's got to be a deeper reason for it. Um,
Yeah. Again, so you have a romantic or a romanticized idea of what it's going to be, right? And I imagine most people have a romantic idea of what my profession is, right? Um, if not, there wouldn't be all the books and media and video games.
that's right.
Um, you know,
Uh,
I would posit that we have ideas about what it might be to be a pro boxer, right?
yeah,
And you see the glory and you see the money and you see the fame. What you don't see are the 4 a.m. road work sessions, right? What you don't see are the ice baths and the nursing the little wounds and the
yeah,
daily grind, right?
yeah.
Um, and I've talked to some kids that have said, well, I want to be a Navy SEAL, and my question to them was always, well, what about it draws you to that, right? And one of the most typical responses I get from youngsters is, when you guys like come up out of the water and you got all that black wetsuit stuff on and black mask and your scuba rig and your gun. And I'm like, yeah, man, that looks awesome. It is miserable. You know, you're in cold, shitty water. You can't see. You're just thinning it out, right? Yeah, it looks cool, man, but it sucks.
Most painful photo op ever.
Yeah. So it's to actually do the job,
Yep.
much like I imagine being a boxer, to do the job hurts, right? Like
Yeah.
it takes emotional sacrifice, it takes mental sacrifice, it
Hmm.
takes physical sacrifice, right?
Hmm.
And that is the piece. Those are the pieces that people don't see. Um, so I caution people to disabuse themselves of the notion that all of these things that we do are super duper fun. They're just not. There are awesome things, within my profession that I love doing. Right.
Yeah.
But to get there and the daily grind, and you know getting up onto the range and just doing single shot, bang, holster it, single shot, bang, holster it, right? Like the monotony to become proficient at these things takes discipline and takes a willingness to endure, right? Same thing, as boxing, right? Like
I mean,
you gotta knock out those 1-2s, 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 1-2s,
yeah.
foot, and that sucks. That's not fun.
Nah.
But that is the foundational requirement for anything. Throw a dart at the wall, whatever your profession is. If you want to be the greatest janitor on the planet, your mop bucket's got to be clean when you start, right? Like,
Yeah.
these are the things that people don't pay attention to. You walk into a pristine building and you never see those guys, right? Once in a while, you'll see that guy with the polisher right on the
Yep.
floor,
Every so often you run into it. Yep.
but you don't know what it took to go get that polish into that machine, set it up, keep it clean, maintain it, make sure it makes the result what he is seeking, right? All of those little intrinsic things that nobody pays attention to. They only pay attention to the result. And that's fine and well, but you got to understand, building something like that takes a lot of work and discipline.
And creating those type of comforts for people, citizens, etc. Yeah, it takes a lot of, yeah, you're right. It's just sacrifice. That's the only way
That's
nice
it.
things exist. One more thing, and then I want to start digging into a little bit of the process of becoming a SEAL, but also developing other SEALs. I also want to talk about your experience as an entrepreneur because Um, I think there's a lot to be learned there, and I would assume there's a lot of parallels between what you do now and what you did then, obviously for in a different way. But the why, if you could talk about the different branches. So you were like, I'm being a SEAL,
Yeah.
and I remember talking about it over in your, but then there's different branches of the military that you could have, even though you decided you wanted to serve and we had the moment of watching Under Siege, you would assume that at some point you said, well, let me see what I could do in the Air Force,
Nope.
what I could do. You would assume, okay, you
Yeah.
would assume
No,
that you would
man.
have considered other branches, or were you like locked in on, I'm not even going to look into,
You know,
what it's like to be a ranger or these others. Could you
no.
explain why and what's the difference? And
Yeah. Well, had I been a little more mature,
yeah,
right? I'm in a perfect world, I would have done a little bit more due diligence and you know tried to figure out which one would have been the best fit for me.
yeah,
Um, and they're all excellent, right?
yeah,
SF, you know, within the Army, Green Berets. I've worked with those dudes. Lots of great dudes there. Lots of great dudes in MARSOC. Lots of great dudes in Ranger Bat, right? All of these, you know, units are incredible, dedicated, capable units.
mhm,
Um, and I would have been honored to have served in any of them.
mhm,
But you know, I was a kid, and to me, the pinnacle was the SEAL teams.
yeah.
So I didn't consider anything else. For me, that's where I was headed, whatever it took, and that was kind of it.
That was that.
That was it, man.
Talk to me. What does it mean? By the way, when I say what does it mean, like I remember the school we went to, we had this we would say the hope to will, the zeal to dare, contempt for what is base and mean, pride and
Mhm.
achievement that is fair, and high regard for what is clean, the
Strength that is
strength
in
that
brotherhood,
good, the courage to proclaim success, the will to strive for what is good, and first and always
first and always
manliness.
manliness. That's right.
Exactly. And so when I think about what it meant to be a cadet at our school, military school, I think of that, right? Because
Mm.
there's, you can take that into, you can get detailed with it, you can get broad with it, but it tells you like, what it means to be a part of this broadly. Can you talk about as a Navy SEAL, what differentiates completely aside from the types of work and missions that SEALs do versus Green Berets and so on and so forth, Force Recon, but what makes being a Navy SEAL different, if that makes any sense, from a high level? It's a mentality or
From
cultural, from a cultural
from the other
standpoint.
from the other units,
Yeah,
I don't think anything, man.
really.
Honestly, no, I don't think anything. You know, all of those guys go through a selection, um, and the selections are different, right? They're different in the way that they're created. They're different in the scope and breadth of what the evolutions are within the selection process.
Hmm.
But the goal of all of them is the same, right? The goal is to um, make the candidate very, very uncomfortable,
Hmm.
to push the candidate past where they think their physical body can endure,
Hmm.
so that they have to just make a choice, and that's what it comes down to. That choosing, hey, I realize that I'm in a lot of pain and I'm cold and I'm miserable, but that has to go over here away from me, and I gotta put my mental state over here in endurance and continuing and perseverance. So
It's just same thing.
I don't think I don't think there's any difference in the goal, right? The goal is to create men and women that are willing to do whatever it takes to accomplish their mission, to protect the people next to them, um, and to uphold the standards that their respective branch um, has instilled in them. So that's for every U.S. service person. Full stop.
And then since you started to bring it up a little bit, could you walk us through, man, the process of and I learned a lot because and I've talked through this a little bit with you in the past, the process of becoming a SEAL, and it changed. I mean, I thought I knew, but I had no idea. But can you talk me through the process step by step? You decide you want to become a Navy SEAL.
Yeah,
What's the first thing that happens? Like if you could walk us through that experience and kind of what you're thinking at each juncture. And
sure.
the reason, and it's important because you're one of the toughest, and I mean this, and I'm not just saying it as a compliment, but you're one of the tougher individuals I've ever met in my life, and also the most, for me, in terms of people I know personally, the most like kind of like if I'm doing it, I'm doing it like hard nosed,
Yeah,
like whatever it takes, I'm getting through it. And so walking through like what the process is, but what you're thinking and going through, even as a
yeah,
really headstrong, like confident person going into it and know and your whole life knowing what it entails.
yeah.
It would just be interesting to hear from your standpoint what someone like you is going through, thinking through mentally at each stage.
Okay. Well, I'll try to keep the buds the entire process to a minimum because
Yeah,
you can anybody can pull up YouTube and see day one to 6 months later.
gotcha.
So I don't want to belabor that part too much, but I can talk about just the initial process, right? So in the height of the GWAT, right, the Global War on Terrorism,
Yeah.
um, they needed to sort of expedite, or not expedite, but make more efficient the process to come into special operations across the board, right? So the Army created the 18 X-ray program. 18 series is the denotation for a special forces operator, right?
Mhm.
And so they created a way in which guys that were interested in doing this could say, "Hey," they go to the recruiter. This is what I want to do. I want to be SF, um, and and so they would begin the process to become an 18 X-ray candidate. Not dissimilarly, we had the Navy Challenge program, and that was to create SEALs, SWCC, which are the Special Warfare Combatant Craft Crewmen, right? The
Yeah.
boat guys, EOD for the Navy, rescue swimmers. Um, so it was created so that a guy could walk into a recruiter and say, "Hey, I would like to join the Navy.
Mhm.
I have a very specific idea of what I'd like to do in the Navy. Can you help me accomplish that?" Right. So you go to the recruiter. You say, "This is what I want to do. I want to be a SEAL." They look you up and down and laugh at you. Um, Now, mind you, that the guy you're talking to is not a SEAL, so he has no idea. But numbers don't lie, so he bases his initial assessment on that. He says, "Okay, so you're gonna begin your normal Navy stuff, and just like we would recruit anyone into the Navy, we have to do those processes, and you got to take the ASVAB, right, and take these tests, and just to determine whether or not you can come into the military at all.
Got it.
And then there's a specific screening test, the PST, the physical screening test, and that required a 500-meter swim, max push-ups in 2 minutes, max sit-ups in 2 minutes, max pull-ups from dead hang, and then a 1.5-mile run, right? And that's the order. And you could go online and go to the SEAL Challenge program, and it outlines what those minimum scores were. And as
Okay.
long as you hit those minimum scores, you could get a contract. That went away for a while, and they started what was called the draft. So when I came in, they were only taking the top 10% of PST scores.
Mm.
So you really had to kind of crush the PST to get a contract. And the first PST I took, um, I didn't know how to do the combat side stroke, which is the stroke you need to do in buds.
Yeah.
And you can also do the breaststroke for the PST. So here I am doing the breaststroke. You're never going to hit the time doing that.
Yeah.
I had a pretty abysmal time in the swim. My push-ups, sit-ups, and pull-ups were fine. They weren't astronomical, but I hit the minimums. And then my run was pretty abysmal.
Oh yeah, because you're a
So I
sprinter.
finished the I was a sprinter, yeah. So I finished the run, and I thought, okay, check. I got some work to do, right? So um, that was in August when I came in, or when I was trying to come in. Um, by October, I was able to, crush that thing. So it gave me a starting point where I understood, okay, I got to get my ass in the pool. You know, I got to start doing 2 and 3 day workouts to get where I need to be. And then, you know, I got a call, hey, you got picked up. So got the contract. You know, you get a leave date, right? Typically, it's called DEP, delayed entry program, and that was like, I don't know, 6 months in front of me. So I just kind of hung out and trained for 6 months, getting ready to go to boot camp. And then post boot camp, everybody goes to regular Navy boot camp, but back then they were putting guys in the challenge program into a division called the 800 division. And it was for all the guys that were coming in to be SEALs, SWCS, EOD, and rescue swimmers.
And so even after passing the challenge, then you trained for 6 months in preparation for going.
Yeah, that was just training on my own, right?
Gotcha. Getting ready.
Just getting ready, because there was, you know, nothing left to do but wait for my ship date.
Okay.
And then, yeah, boot camp, 8 weeks in Great Lakes. That's the only place we do boot camp anymore, in Chicago, northern Chicago. And then after that, we had BUD/S Prep, the preparatory course, NSW preparatory course, and that's really an incredible program. I mean, you've got Olympic grade swim coaches,
Wow.
run coaches, lifting coaches, and you're swimming 5 days a week, you're running 3 days a week, and you're lifting 2 days a week.
Wow.
And that's for a couple of months. And really the Navy is paying you to just become an absolute animal.
to get your to get ready. Wow.
To get ready. Yeah, you're not even yeah. And I think that I would make the argument that makes BUD/S physically easier than some of the guys, you know, that went through back in the 90s where there was no prep.
Yeah.
You know, some of these guys said, hey, I want to be a SEAL, and they pulled them off a ship. They said, cool, man, here's your show up date to BUD/S. Good luck. You know, so physically that was on them to try to prepare, and they didn't really know what they were preparing for, and you couldn't. And then, you know, they created BUD/S Prep in an effort to try to have a higher success rate, making it through BUD/S. Mm-hmm. Interestingly enough, it did not change the success rate, which we, you know, we could talk about my opinions on why. But ultimately, right, so you then you finish BUD/S Prep, and then you get your orders to head out to Coronado, California, and you get your show up time for BO, for basic orientation. It used to be called NDOC. Mm-hmm. Sorry. Yeah, so you get your orders. Hey, we're heading out. Go out to Coronado, and you check into BO. Basic orientation is it's a few weeks. I want to say 3 weeks. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
But and orientation is to get you prepared to do some of the more technical aspects of first phase, right? So your first time on the O course, right? That's going to be in BO. Your first time swimming in the bay and in the ocean, open water, that's going to be in BO. You know, your first time putting a boat on your head or doing log PT, and that's really to kind of get these candidates to understand, hey, this is what this is going to feel like, because there is a technical piece to it, right? You gotta learn how to go through the O course, etc. Yeah. So that's a few weeks there, and then you start first phase. And you know, at the time, it was 8 weeks per phase, right? First phase is the conditioning phase, which culminates with Hell Week at week 5. That has changed kind of back and forth a couple of times when that is in first phase. And then the final couple of weeks there afterward are kind of letting you heal up a little bit, and you know, learning kind of the old UDT mission of hydrographic reconnaissance, and learning what our predecessors in the Naval Combat Demolition Units and the UDTs were doing in World War II, right? Wow. Identifying beach landing sites and taking soundings, and you know, getting an understanding of what the subsurface looked like to bring landing craft on, right?
Yeah.
So that's like the old Frogman mission.
Zoe, can you actually, just for the internet connection, leave this door open and these doors open? Yeah, just that I think we'll get us smoother. I'm listening. Sorry, I just wanted to
Oh,
make sure I
okay.
get it
Yeah.
so I can see you.
So, that's the kind of the end part of first phase, letting guys heal up and kind of learning some of the history and understanding, where we came from.
Mhm.
Um, and then you go into second phase, which is the dive phase, and you're learning open circuit, right, regular scuba, and then the closed circuit rig,
Yeah.
and that kind of culminates in what's called pool competency or open circuit 8 test. Um, and then from there you start diving the Draeger and learning, what it looks like to be a combat swimmer and kind of learn how to do that. And then after second phase, you got third phase. Third phase is like the land warfare and demolitions phase, and you head out to San Clemente Island, and you're kind of learning from 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 beginning, uh, how to run the weapon systems that are utilized in the SEAL teams, right? So some M4 variant, sidearm, which for us back then was a 226, and then learning all the initial demolition stuff.
Wow.
And then after third phase, you graduate buds. So that if you went straight through and didn't ever get rolled for an injury or for performance, you're looking at 6 months there for buds,
Okay.
and then you go on to SEAL qualification training, SQT, and that's kind of where we start actually focusing on how to do the job of a SEAL. So you start learning tactics and that kind of stuff, and you kind of go through all of the potential requirements that you'd have in a platoon,
Gotcha.
and that's about 7 months, give or take, because you've got free fall school in there and SEER and some other stuff, and then yeah, so 13 months later, after you began the very specific NSW pipeline, um, if you went straight through the process, they put a bird on you, a trident, and you're going to go check into a SEAL platoon.
And if you what broadly speaking, because obviously there's not everybody makes it through. Um, the throughout that whole process, I'm assuming some people are just saying this is not for me. At each juncture, is that kind of what happens, or are they told,
Yeah, I mean,
broadly
you can quit anytime. Um, most attrition occurs in first phase.
okay,
That's kind of physically the hardest phase. Um, but I mean, I've seen guys make it all the way to the platoons and go out the door on their first deployment and decide, what, I don't really want to do this.
after all that?
Yeah, kind of crazy, but it has happened, and good on them. I mean, you gotta have respect for a guy who's willing to uh, kind of take ownership and say, you know what, I did all this. It was really hard. I know that I'm pot committed at this point,
Yeah.
but my heart's not in it, and I have enough respect for the men standing next to me that I can look them in the eye and say, I'm going to leave because I can't be the teammate that you need. So I think that takes a lot.
And, and for you personally, then I wanted to, so because I'm doing the math, by the way, so it's if you from the time you go through you did the challenge, 6 months, you waiting, but you're preparing, then 2 more months of actually getting paid to prepare. So it's 8 months. So it's about a 24-month process,
About
plus
2 years,
minus
yeah,
two
yeah.
years just to get on the field.
It's 2 years if you go straight through, man. I mean,
Yeah.
and most people don't. Most people get rolled somewhere in the pipeline.
Gotcha.
And a roll just means that either you've injured yourself or you get performance rolled. You can't meet a specific standard, and they say, hey, we're going to pull you out of training, and you're going to join up with either the next class, or if you're injured, it may be 4 or 5, 6 classes later, depending on the injury. I mean, there's guys that get double stress fractures and femurs, and they're looking at 4 to 6 month pause, right? So
Wow.
um, it could take you years from beginning the process to actually putting a trident on. Can take years and years.
And would you say that for the folks who, because it sounds like just to get um into the train into buds, like you have to meet a pretty solid, you have to meet a pretty tough physical standard, or and so on and so forth, pretty selective one. And So at that point, the people that don't make it to the end because, like you said, they get rolled or for whatever reason, is it what percentage of it, if you were just to throw a dart at it, would be mental versus physical, or is it equal parts mental, physical, the
Yeah.
challenge?
So, as I mentioned, when they're paying you to get prepared, right? Sending you
Yeah.
to the prep course, every single one of those guys showed up to basic orientation in Coronado physically able to complete buds. Every single one. Um, it's then going to be determined if you really want to be there and you have the mental fortitude, because they're going to push you past the physical abilities, right? Every single dude is going to get broken. Every single dude is going to be pushed past their physical limits at some point, and that's by design, right?
Yeah.
They can't shoot at you and show you what combat would be, so they have to try to create stressors based on physical discomfort and creating chaos. Um, so
And
I'd argue that it is far more mental than it is physical.
wow. It reminds me of I was reading a quote the other day, and I can't remember it, but it was Cus D'Amato, who is Mike Tyson's trainer,
Mm,
and you talked about boxing earlier, and he said that, and I think he said I think he could have said 85 to 90% of boxing is mental, and he said that it would shock people if he said if people really understood it, they'd be shocked to understand that that much of it is mental. And this is a guy who's the greatest trainer, I think, top 5 greatest trainers of all time. Um, and I think it's similar. Like you have to have a base level of athleticism to be a competitor in boxing, but beyond that, um, it is. I'm still learning how mental it is. What do you, from your standpoint, and then I want to ask you just from someone who's trying to, working on developing young men and women. But from your standpoint, when you were going through it, what were you telling you? What is the self-talk like when
mm,
no matter how tough you are, you're going through it, you're not
yeah,
sure, I don't know what
yeah,
your self-talk is like, but tell me about the tough moments and what you're saying to yourself.
yeah. You know, I think everybody kind of considers at some point like, how much more can I do of this, right? I can honestly tell you from the bottom of my heart, I never thought about quitting. I did think, kind of in perpetuity, whatever we were doing, man, this really sucks. I can't wait to do the next thing to stop doing this. And then you start doing the next thing and you're like, oh man, this really sucks. I can't wait to do the next thing. Um, so that was pretty much all of at least first phase for
Mhm.
me. You know, I was I was not the fastest dude, and I would see guys even in prep, like just crushing me on things, crushing me on runs, crushing me on swims in the pool.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that I, I was thinking, often, man, am I just way out of my league here? Or, do I have any business being here?
Yeah.
Because there are just some incredible athletes, right? We get former professional athletes, former football players that played in the NFL, former Olympians, like, guys that are just absolute studs.
And
Um, and
and you're a hell of an athlete, so that's for to hear you say that, that
I
must
was
be
a
really
I was a
intimidating.
I was a mediocre athlete in comparison to some of these guys. So there are dudes that you're just watching them and it's like they're unfazed,
Yeah.
And so I think that was a mental difficulty for me where I kind of was not sure if I could make muster on that. Like these guys are so much stronger and faster than I am.
Yeah.
I remember one specific kid. Obviously, I won't use his name. We would be doing a down and back run in Great Lakes and prep, and this kid was built like a tank, swam fast, ran fast. I have not I have not made it to within like half a mile of the turnaround point,
Mhm.
and I see this kid already blazing past me, returning, and I was like, he's like, my God, man, like what is that? What is that dude made of, right? Like
Yeah.
how if that is the standard, how in God's name am I going to be able to meet that? Um, and then he didn't make it through the first week of first phase.
Really?
Yeah, didn't make it through the first week. And
Interesting.
you know, there's there's an opinion that a lot of the guys that have been excellent throughout their entire lives have never really experienced failure. The guys that were the best athlete in their high school and went on to be the best athlete in their Division I program,
Yeah.
and then maybe went on to be an Olympian. All they have known is success, right? They found something they were good at. They became excellent at it, of course, through discipline and hard work and perseverance,
But
but
always kind of at the top. Yeah.
always at the top. And then when they first taste failure, their minds shut off, right? Like, okay, I can't be here anymore. So you'll see some dudes that you would never know in a million years that they're SEALs or Green Berets or Rangers or insert whatever. And you look at him, you're like, man, that guy's kind of scrawny and not so intimidating.
Yeah.
But they grew up being the same way, and they grew up scrappy, and they grew up with perseverance, and they grew up fighting for every inch, right? So they have the mental piece there. They have the tenacity. They don't need to be the best, on the playing field. They know that they're never going to be the star athlete. They might not be the strongest dude, but they sure as shit ain't going to be, the guy who gives up. So
they're used to that. Yeah.
They're used to it. And no matter what you do to those guys, they ain't going anywhere. So that is the mark of success. And frankly, I think that speaks to the mark of success anywhere in life, right? Be willing to get knocked down. Don't be afraid to fail. You got to understand that it's going to be hard, whatever it is. Yeah. Buds, being an entrepreneur, being a boxer, insert whatever, it's going to be hard. It's supposed to be. If you're not willing to do the work and suck it up and be in pain and endure, then you're probably not going to reap the rewards of success in whatever it is that you're chasing.
Just is what it is. And I want to come back to this because I have some questions about the mental side of getting through that. But you brought up being entrepreneurship, and can we weave real quick to that? And can you can you just share, because when at one point I want to say mid-20s, you had a pretty successful, was it a restaurant, or walk me through that, and just with any parallels between like being an entrepreneur and a soldier.
Yeah, I mean, I was in the food and beverage industry for a while, and kind of chased that for a bit because I couldn't come directly into the Navy because of an injury. And yeah, I mean, I have never owned a restaurant, but I did some startups. I worked on some openings, and not dissimilarly, right? Like, you got to be willing to put in those 100-hour work weeks, where you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, and you just got to grind it out, and be willing to understand that the hard work and suffering that you're putting in today, hopefully will bear fruit tomorrow.
Delayed, yeah. Delayed
like farmers don't plant fruiting trees, right? They're planting seeds, and they're out there tilling the soil, and they're understanding that it takes time and it takes work, and you got to wait to see what that thing grows into.
Yeah. And do you going back to getting through buds, and this is a question just to understand your mindset. Are you thinking like one step at a time, like just keep putting one foot in front of the other, or are you thinking hour by hour, or just get through this day, or is it more macro? The reason I ask is like me, like training to fight, like especially when I'm on long runs, I'm like, some days I'm just like, I can run forever. I feel that, and then some days I'm like, every step is painful. Yeah. And I'm like, all right, 10 more minutes. All right, 2 more minutes. And, and there's different things that kind of get me through it. Or I like put on a song and try to think about something. And can you talk through like the mental exercises that get you through stuff like that, and especially back when you were dealing with getting through buds?
Yeah. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dean Karnazes. He's
Dean Karnazes?
Yeah, Dean Karnazes, he's an ultra runner and kind of one of the beginning pioneers of ultra running in the U.S. Right,
Yeah.
so has done like all of the big crazy races in the U.S. And he said that when he's doing like 100-mile race, right, he's running 100 miles. Those thoughts creep into your head, right? Like this really hurts. Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
I sure wish this was over. Gosh, I could just stop, right? And so his adage was, do the very best you can in the next 10 feet, repeat.
I love that.
So
Do the very best you can in the next 10 feet. Repeat. Okay, go
that's
ahead.
it, man. That's it. So I did really struggle with some distance running stuff. I'm not a natural distance runner. Um, and I would just look at the ground about 10 feet in front of me and pick something to run to. Um, I would not allow myself to look out ahead to see where the turnaround point was, because it didn't matter. I wasn't there yet. I had 10 feet in front of me I needed to cover. So to kind of compartmentalize and segment anything that you're doing that sucks, I have found that is the most successful way for me. I imagine other people find little tricks that they can put their mind into a different space. But that resonated with me so much, that Dean Karnazes quote. And so I was like, all right, check. Look 10 feet ahead of me, get there. And then when I got there, look 10 feet ahead of me, get there.
Yeah.
Slowly, but I got there. I would also, if it was a long evolution, like a ruck run or something like that I knew, all right, this thing's going to be several hours of just kind of miserable running with weight. I would compose a thank you letter to my friends and family that I never actually got to recite this to them, but it was a thank you for believing me that I would deliver upon graduation. So I'd picture my parents, I'd picture my siblings, I'd picture friends that were following me, in this journey. And I'd picture them all sitting in a room and me being able to give this sort of thank you speech to them for believing that I could do this ridiculous thing that I had set out to do.
You're thinking through this in the midst of doing it?
Yeah, I'm doing the speech in my head while I'm doing a ruck run,
Wow.
Because for me that was kind of twofold. I stopped thinking about the soft sand and I stopped thinking about the heavy ruck digging into my shoulders, and I had to put all my mental capacity toward success, toward giving a speech based on me having succeeded and achieved this thing. And the more that I did that, the more I envisioned that was the only outcome that was possible. Yeah, that was kind of my mental trick for not thinking about being in pain.
And it's so funny. It reminds me a little bit. It's not exactly the same thing. It's way more intense than what I'm about to say. But I think about some of the great athletes that talk about just going, mentally visualizing, hitting the shot, winning the game, hitting the shot, winning the game, whatever it is, and how important that was. And but to me, it sounds somewhat similar. Are you so now as a leader, when you're looking at, or just maybe a better question, when someone's going through buds, is the leadership saying, you got this, come on, you can do it, and giving mental tips on how to get through it? And every morning it's like, hey, this is going to be hard, but just remember this while you're going through it. Are you getting like some Tony Robbins, or is it just like, figure it out? How does that go?
No, there is in the beginning, there is zero positive reinforcement, zero. And I think that's good. Some guys need to hear, hey buddy, you got it, man. Go out and get him, Tiger.
Yeah.
Nobody is saying that to you in our pipeline. And a lot of guys don't do well with the negative reinforcement, right? A lot of guys because the instructors are telling you you should not be here. That is the overarching message. You are not strong enough. You are not fast enough. Do everyone a favor and go away. Um, and and that is a good thing, right? That is a good thing. It's a good thing because at least in our line of work, if you are downrange and you're in a bad spot, the enemy is not going to tell you, "Hey man, you got this, buddy." It's not going to happen, right?
No one's, the universe is not going to tell you that. No one is,
Nope.
right?
No.
Got it.
So that ultimately would be a disservice to the guys.
Yeah.
And they do. They'll get in your face and tell you, "Hey man." And sometimes some of them yell. Some of them, the ones that I find are more successful in conveying that message, are very calm and they're not hateful.
Yeah.
And they just come up to you and say, "You know what, man? I know you're trying real hard, but this just isn't for you." And that works. A lot of kids are like, "Oh, you know what? That guy's right. I'm out of here."
I'm not laughing, but it's just the funny. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. To me, I thrived on that. I thrive on somebody telling me I can't.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the guys that are successful because they're of the mindset, "Oh really, I can't hold my beer." And that helped me. So when somebody was like, "Nah dude, you ain't cut out for this," I would say, "Oh, okay, check, watch me." So that was beneficial to me. A lot of guys, not beneficial to them, and they go away.
And just to be clear to anyone who's listening, the reason I'm laughing is not because anyone to just saddle up and say I'm going to try to become a Navy SEAL has got more guts than I do. But I'm laughing because I met a really famous, or at least in my world, boxing coach, and I was asking him like what the gyms were like back in like the 50s and 60s. And the reason I'm laughing because I know boxers who say they want to box, and when they actually go through it, they don't want to. And I was thinking of that as you were talking. But he said that you'd walk into a gym most of the time, and they'd be like, "Go home, son. Go home. Go home." And you haven't even like started to do anything. Just like, "Go home. This ain't for you." And then you beg to stay in there, and the next day, "Go home. Go home. Get out of here. This ain't for you." And they would literally like continue to run you out of there. And the people who stuck around, then you had to prove yourself. But it was just so funny. He was saying how some kids and young people, after their first 3 or 4 hard days, they'd be like, "Yeah, this is not for you." And they'd be like, "Yeah, you're right. I'm out of here."
Yep.
And that dynamic was always just so funny to me. That obviously this is less funny because it's so serious. But and the final question on that, man, and want to transition to something else, but well, you're so humble and like, and maybe I'm wrong in asking this. You're humble, but I know how, if I don't say what I'm about to say, how you might answer this question. But and you're also very much like, it is what it is, just do the work and so on and so forth. But long story short, I've heard and read a lot about that, the body, essentially your mind will stop you from doing what your body is capable of. And that someone said, I can't remember the statistic, but like when you're about to quit, you're only at like 30% of your full capacity or 50% of your full capacity for work or something that requires endurance and so on and activating, the guts to survive and so on and so forth, that there's so much more to give past when you want to quit. And so, and I've touched on some of that in my training in boxing, like running 10 miles with no preparation and like sparring for 15 rounds and things of that nature. But I know it goes way past, like your body and mind can go way past what I've done. Ultra marathoners running 50 miles and 100 miles and so on and so forth. My question for you, because I know you've touched that space quite a bit, is there how is your mind different when you've crossed over into that place where, wow, I just did a lot more than I thought I was capable of, and now the baseline goes from here to here. I'm just using broad terms. So maybe, the body wants to quit at 30%. Now you've gone to 50%. Now this is your baseline, and this is just how I'm thinking about it. So tell me where I'm wrong. And then now that's your baseline, and now you push past that, and you're like, "Oh, I want to quit." But then at some point when you've been able to tap into your body and mind's full capacity to push past pain, and you know what you're capable of, do you feel different day to day? do you feel different? Like, do you feel like a different person? Can you just talk about what happens on the other side of that transformation, if that makes any sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I think for a lot of guys, they did not maybe reach 100% physical capacity,
Mhm.
right? Some of those guys were, as I mentioned, just absolute monsters.
Yeah.
And maybe they'll have to really tap into that mental piece when you're, being drowned underwater or something like that later in training. And, everybody has their moment. Everybody has their moment where it's like, oh boy, this is not the deal. For me, physically, I was definitely at 110%. So physically
You were taking it there.
yeah, physically for me, it took everything I could possibly muster, for sure. Um, and and I know that it does not for everyone. It gets real close
Mhm.
for everybody. Like and it's just the duration, right? One of the unique things about buds is just how long it is.
Mhm.
Um, it's the longest selection process of all of the special operations. And that's unique, right? Everybody, you look at guys in the CrossFit Games, incredible athletes, really strong. CrossFit Games are 5 days, or whatever it is. I think it's 5 days, or maybe it's a weekend. I'm not a CrossFitter. I do watch it; it's very entertaining.
Yeah.
And those guys are incredible. Make those guys do that for 6 months and see if they can last. So that is the unique piece, right? The unique piece is just the duration, the grind, right? Like you wake up and every fiber of your body, head to toe, hurts. You're bruised, you're, abraded, your skin's falling off, you're messed up. So that's why it comes down to, do you really want to continue doing this? Um, and my mindset throughout the really hard physical parts and throughout Hell Week was just, you have to kill me to get me to go away. And I'm not dead yet, so I guess I'll just keep going. But there was just no way. There was no way I was going to make the phone call to my father and say, "Hey, Pop, I couldn't do it anymore. I didn't have it in me anymore." And I did not know that I would make it, right? And maybe some guys did. Maybe some guys were so capable and comfortable that they were like, "I got this," and at no point did they doubt.
Yeah.
I existed in doubt often, but it didn't matter. It just didn't matter. I was not willing to throw in the towel. And I think that's kind of important, no matter what you're doing, right? Because nobody knows if they can. Maybe some people are so confident in their abilities and in their ultimate capacity that they know unequivocally that they will be successful. That was not me. That is not me. I learn things every day. Still, I learn things every day, even in my profession. But I know that whatever it takes, I'm going to figure it out, and I'm going to keep pushing. Will I fail? Probably. But will I fail ultimately? I hope not, because I'm not going to give up. I'm going to just keep doing what it takes. And hey, this didn't work. This is a dead end. Okay, let's find another way in.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of how I approach everything. I don't think I have a lot of natural talents, but I do have tenacity. My parents gave me tenacity.
Yeah.
God gave me tenacity. I work with some incredible human beings, and I've worked with incredible human beings throughout my career.
Yeah.
From all different walks, right? Intel people, people from other agencies, people from other countries, even, right? And a lot of those people just have pure raw talent, and maybe they can rest a little bit more on that. I don't feel that I have that pure raw talent, so I just got to work a little bit harder and
So,
just never give in.
and so the last thing I'll say on that is I'm wondering, there's I read a study about how like a person who's very out of shape and maybe hasn't worked out in 2 or 3 years, and you get them up off the couch and say, hey, and you point, you know, a quarter mile in the distance and say, you got to run there, right? And they look and it feels, you know, just to demonstrate the point, you know, to someone who's, anyway, they look and it feels like, oh my God, I can't do that. And it looks to them like 3 miles, or it looks to them like a mile, even though it's a quarter mile.
Sure.
Then you take that same person, you get them in shape, they're running every day, they're running 3, 4 miles, they're physically like, you know, fit and confident, and they're in a routine, they lose weight and whatever it is, get stronger. That same person, you line them up and they look in the distance and see that quarter mile, it actually looks like, you know, less than a quarter mile versus
Yeah. So
looking longer.
you're talking about moving your baseline, and that was one of your questions that I didn't answer, so I
Well,
apologize. But yeah,
well,
you do get reframed, right?
I'm
You
just
do.
curious, like what intimidates you at this point? So,
Oh man.
what looks like a challenge now, I guess, because like if we're like, hey, we got to move the furniture upstairs, a lot of people will be like, hey, can you call somebody else? You
Yeah.
know, like for you going through these things you've been through, does that, you know, because I know you push
Yeah.
yourself quite a bit before buds and so on and so forth, but w- what looks like a challenge to you now? I guess if that makes any sense. Just talking about like physical stuff, running or whatever, but can you just talk through the difference?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm getting older, so you know, my my best years physically are certainly behind me.
Yeah.
But I train every day, man. Well, maybe not every day. I train most days,
Yeah.
and that benchmark has changed for me, right? I'm not trying to, you know, deadlift 600 pounds anymore. I'm not trying to do some of these crazy things. I'll leave that to the youngsters, but
Yeah.
I'm working on just longevity now.
Yeah.
But what looks like a challenge to me,
Yeah.
being a good dad.
Amen.
That, you know, my reframe is being a father, being a husband. Um, you know, I'm learning how to do that every day, right? You know, you're a parent. There is no handbook for that one, man.
No.
They give us handbooks, you know, in the teams. You want a demolition handbook, you don't know how to make something, go look it up.
Yeah.
There's no daddy handbook. So yeah, that is the challenge for me, is being not dissimilar to my father. I had an
Yeah.
incredible father. Um, you know, being a good role model for my son, raising a good, strong man
Yeah.
in the world, um, raising a man who understands what his role should be and must be,
Mhm.
in my opinion. And
Can you talk
I
about that a little bit?
yeah, yeah. You know, I might be in the minority now in America, with what I think a young man should be and what I think a man should be.
Yeah.
But you know, talking about what you're willing to fail and what you're not willing to fail, I'm willing to fail anything in this life, but I will not fail being a parent. I will not fail instilling in my son the understanding that he is responsible not only for himself but for the people that he chooses to include in his life.
Mhm.
That is, in my opinion, that is the role of a man and a father and a husband.
Mhm.
Um, it doesn't mean it's a one-sided thing, right? As a dad and a husband, I am not solely responsible for the success of my family. I rely heavily on my wife.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, she runs circles around me. You've met her.
Yeah.
She runs circles around me, dude.
Yeah.
Like
She's on
she
it.
she is up earlier. She is working longer. She is a beast, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, she has what she brings to the table. I have what I bring to the table,
Mhm.
and that's team. That's our team, right?
Mhm.
But for my son, you know, his responsibility as he grows up is to be a protector. Doesn't mean you have to learn how to be the baddest dude in the room.
Yeah.
But he must be physically capable, right? He must be strong.
Yeah.
That is important. He must have logic. He must have sound reasoning. He must have education so that he knows where mistakes have been made in our history. Um, he must provide not only for himself, but for his family. And again, does not mean he needs to be the sole provider, right? There's not one single dude on a team that is responsible for everything, unless, you're LeBron James, I guess. Um, you know,
But he needs to be prepared to be.
but he needs to be prepared to be, right?
Yeah.
And I think we've gotten away from that a little bit in our country, and maybe not just in our country, maybe in society at large, where we're trying to sort of reframe that everyone is equal, everyone should be pulling the same amount.
Yeah.
That's just not the case, man.
Just not reality.
I'm a 200-pound man. My wife is itty bitty. We are not the same.
Yeah.
That's okay.
That's
She is smarter than me. She is more capable of making money than I am.
funny.
That's okay.
Completely fine.
That does not change my abilities as a husband and a father, and my responsibilities to be the protector, and so those are the things that I look for from my son. And when I say protector, right, I mean physical protector,
Mm-hmm.
but also emotional and spiritual protector. And in that regard, my wife is responsible for that side too, right? Um, to be able to nurture is not a feminine trait. It is not a masculine trait. It is a human trait. To be able to be physically strong is not a masculine trait. It is a human trait. There are physically very strong women. There are aggressive women, right? You look at the UFC.
Yeah.
Those pick any one of those ladies, right? Give me a 135-pound UFC caliber female, and I will give you 99% of dudes that would get knocked out by her. Okay,
I
so
wouldn't want to wrestle with her either. I can tell you
right,
that.
so these are not mutually exclusive ideas,
Yeah.
nor does either side own physical strength and prowess.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you are a man, you must unequivocally have physical prowess. You must unequivocally have a sound mind. You must be able to remove ego and anger and insecurity from how you talk to people and how you engage with other people, right? The loudest dude in the room is rarely the most dangerous,
What it is.
I had a very interesting conversation with a dear friend of mine a couple of days ago. He came and stayed with us, and he was talking about how people, when you walk into a party, we self sort, and animals also self sort, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you take your dog to the dog park, and depending on what kind of dog it is, right? You walk into the dog park, the whole pack mentality that's already sort of free floating and changing perpetually in that dog park assesses that new dog that's walked in, right? And they kind of self sort. Where is that dog placed in a hierarchy in that dog park? And it happens immediately, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can watch it. And if you've got a big, assertive, confident dog, he walks in there calm. He walks in there knowing he can handle himself. If you have a little dog that's terrified, walks in there freaking out and rolls over onto its back and shows its belly immediately, right?
That's true. Yeah.
We do the same thing. Okay, you walk into a party, and let's consider an adult party, not a party from college, because nobody knows what's going on then. But you walk into a party where you might not know everyone. right?
Mhm.
Every single man in that room will look at you as a man up and down and assess where you fit in that hierarchy immediately. That is an inherent trait that is built into us, right?
Yep.
That is in our hard wiring. And it should be in our hard wiring. And
Yeah.
we've started to kind of deny some of those fundamental uh, points that got us to this place in existence, right?
Yeah.
You have to be able to look at another person and know, is that a threat to me? Is that person friend or foe, right? Can that person harm me and my clan, right? My family, whatever. That's built into you. That is survival. That is instinct. Um, and so I use air quotations, you, right? One should, as a man and as a woman, be able to walk into a room and hold presence.
Mhm.
Incredibly important, right? Um, Important for survivability, right? We walk down the street and we talk about walking down the street in the white, the yellow, the red, the black. Are you familiar with these colors as I'm presenting them?
Yeah. Yeah.
So most people
Big.
walk around in the white, right? Especially now. It's gotten to the point where everybody is walking around staring at their phone, right?
Yeah.
Um, Many of whom are walking around staring at their phone, headphones on, no idea what's going on around them. We call that walking around in the white. Okay. They have no presence. They have no understanding of whether or not they're about to be made a victim, and they cannot react if something bad happens right now. We've got instincts of fight, flight, and freeze. Um, if you're walking around in the white and a bomb goes off, or some crazy guy whips out a knife and just starts slicing people up, which is happening more and more often in the world, you are going to freeze, right? You are not primed to react to things around you
Yeah.
because you are not present. You are in the white. We try to walk around in the yellow, right? Like I am cautiously aware of everything around me. I am cautiously aware of where exits are. I'm cautiously aware of where I might be vulnerable or weak. If I'm walking around with my son and my wife, I'm a little more heightened, right? Um, and I need to be,
Yeah.
because those are my physical vulnerabilities, are my son and my wife. Um, and then you're primed for action, right? You're primed to take that to the next level, right? Into the red, right? Into the, okay, now I need to act. Now I need to be physically violent in defense of the people that I am with, right? But you can't go from white to red, right? Because you're
Yeah.
gonna freeze, or you're gonna run.
Yeah.
Hopefully you run, right? Hopefully you have the capacity to get away. Most people don't, man. When they look at you know some of these instances, you can pull up videos on the subways and on the streets. People in the white, something happens, boom, they just freeze. They don't even run. So when you're in the white and something bad happens, you're probably going to go from white right into black. And that black space is, you don't know what happened. You cannot recall what occurred. And they interview people that, hey, this guy pulled out a gun and started shooting. Can you describe the person? Nope. Can you describe what he was wearing? Nope.
That's why.
Because they
That's why.
because they were in the white.
Yeah.
They weren't paying attention to anything around them.
Yeah.
And then this tragic thing begins to unfold, and their brains shut off. Their amygdala takes over, and that's it. They're out of the fight.
Wow.
So,
That is
back to
really
the
tough.
back to the root question of what do I hope to instill in my son? It's to not be in the white. He doesn't have an iPhone. He doesn't have an iPad. When we're out in public, he's not staring at a screen, right?
Yeah.
Um, he's paying attention to what is around him, because if you are not capable, if you are not in the yellow and cautious and aware of what's around you, as we move forward in our society that seems to be devolving every day,
Mhm.
when something bad happens, you're going to be in the black, and that is how you become a victim.
You know, we I want to pick up there because you know, it was important for me, for people to understand a little bit about your background today, because I'd like um to have you on is honestly as often as possible. But I'd love to, next time we talk, pick up there, because there's so much. I have so many questions about what you just explained, and that it answers a lot of questions, things I had question marks around. But I have so many more questions about it. But I want to ask you real quick, and I said, and this, if you could talk through this, and as we close, my wife the other day, we're always battling over like she's like, well, why did he do this? And it's all, and I'm like, that's how men are. Like,
Mm.
and some, and I'm not referring to like what people call toxic traits and so on and so forth, but I'm just like, yo, that's part of like how men deal with each other. And like, oh, I know you don't understand that, but as a man, this is how we do things. And sometimes it sounds like I'm saying, oh, because you're a man, you don't understand. And that's not the point. But my point to her is like, we're not gonna like we're not going to stop testosterone, right? Like we can't stop that. That's nature's thing and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of things like you just talked about, the self-sorting. I can't change the fact that when I walk into the room, there's some self-sorting going on, and it's going to
Yeah,
affect the way these
yeah,
interactions happen. We're not changing them.
yeah.
We can ignore it if we want, or we can
No,
decide like how we want to be sorted, right?
yeah.
By how we prepare ourselves. And so the other day, I can't remember what happens, and she sent me a text, and she's like, she's like, okay, I think I'm starting to understand. I think she was like, I think I'm starting, I think somebody I know who's a man was doing something around her, or would not respond to her, like wouldn't even look in her direction, I think. And she was like, what's wrong with me? And da 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 da. And I was like, babe, that's respect, you know? And because I was
Mhm.
out of town or something like that. But long story short, she's like, okay, I'm starting to understand your code. And I said, it's not a code. It's just I said, it's how we survive each other.
Yes.
And without certain things and certain understandings, like we don't survive each other. Men don't survive each other, and so on and so forth. Like you talked about this self-sorting, and so just there's that. And I never said anything like that, but I felt it. Like I was like, that's how we survive each other. Otherwise, we can't work. We can't coexist safely. So just your response to that, and then lastly, you told me I was talking to you not too long ago, and you brought up a quote about why, I guess it's kind of like why there's a little bit of a masculinity vacuum, but that you said it was a result of good times. I think it was that, but you said a quote,
Mm.
and I just, if you could tell me about that, but just your response to what I said to my wife, and then if you could share that quote as we close.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So we've begun kind of denying some of our instinct and viewing it as base or underdeveloped, right?
Yeah.
Um, Neanderthal, right? It, it, we are animals, right? We are creatures that have to breathe oxygen and drink water and eat food, and we have to survive. A lot of those things have become so, unfortunately, simple that we've forgotten what it took before to create that, right?
Mm.
I can pull into McDonald's, I can I can blabber into a box, and I can scroll Instagram while they make me some poison that they hand me, and I call that food. Um, and I don't have to go out and risk life and limb to bring sustenance back to my family.
Yeah.
But even though we have created that scenario, we have not destroyed the inherent part that is in us that says, go out and provide,
Mm.
go out and survive. And moreover, we have begun to create a society that looks down on those things,
Yeah.
that looks at little boys and tells them to sit still for 8 hours in a classroom, and tells them there's something wrong with them when they're antsy and they want to go outside.
Yeah.
uh, the modern education system was not created uh, for our children, right? For what their brains are needing, and what their brains are hoping to have and to experience in that moment, right? We have these inherent things in us. We have these pieces that are created so deeply in our infrastructure that denying them entirely is not only ignorant, but it's self-destructive, right?
It's dangerous.
It's dangerous, man. It's telling little boys that, hey, you feel like you want to compete with that other little boy. Good, that's okay.
Yeah.
That is built into you because you competing with him makes him better. Him competing with you makes you better.
Amen.
That is how we get faster, right? That is how we get stronger. Hey, you want to race me from here to the soccer goal,
Let's go.
right? Like that's what we used to do when I was in elementary school, right?
Yeah.
And we thought it was play, and it was play, but it was also making us run. It was also making us compete. It was also giving us an opportunity to become 1% better because we spent our recess racing a buddy, right?
Yeah.
This is how we grow, not in saying competition's bad, everyone is equal. We are not all equal, and that is okay. We are not created to all be equal. We should be created with the understanding that we have the ability to achieve on an equal basis.
Yeah.
That's great. Equity and equality, not the same things, right?
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother discussion. It's a whole nother discussion.
That
But
can be used quickly. Yeah. Amen.
yeah, so hard times, right? Hard times make hard men, and hard men make good times, and good times make soft men. Soft men make hard times, and when we are in the soft men making hard times era of this country, and you see it in the divisive nature of everything. You see it in the social constructs of how we interact with one another, what we put a premium on, uh, with our youth, what we think is good and right and just. And I think some people would disagree with me, because hey, what an incredible time to be alive! Also,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Technology, medicine,
Conveniences of all sorts.
incredible, right?
Yeah.
We are also in the greatest time of human history, right?
Yeah.
What we have accomplished as a species in the last 100 years, in comparison to the previous 1,000 years, is extraordinary, and I don't want to minimize that.
Yeah.
But some of those conveniences, some of those things that have created ease of living for humanity are also making us weaker, and they're making us unhealthy. I don't just mean physically unhealthy, I mean mentally unhealthy, spiritually unhealthy.
Mm.
And so it's so vital that we take a pause, do a real inventory of where we are as a society, where we are as men, uh, and women, where we are as humans, and what are some of the traits that we actually want in our children? What are some of the traits that we want to see in our neighbors and our friends, right? We don't want people that are insecure and hateful and full of vitriol. We want people that are capable, strong, have logic and mental prowess. We want to have people who are able to create the next 100 years for humanity, and to do so from a good place of service, right? To do so from a place of, hey, me being strong and me being smart and me being capable does not take away from your ability to be strong and smart and capable.
Amen.
Right? Those are not mutually exclusive things. I do not have to minimize someone else's abilities or strengths to maximize my own. If I do, I am not the man that I'm supposed to be. That is not a man, right? I should be able to uplift everyone around me. I should be able to make the people that are around me better and smarter and stronger. Their weakness is not my strength.
Mhm. That, and if you could just for the amen, full stop. But just to close, could you say that quote one more time for anybody who didn't catch it the first time? I'm gonna make a note and I'll look it up after this.
Yeah, man. So hard times make hard men, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hard men make good times.
Mm-hmm.
Good times make soft men, and soft men make hard times. And that is the cycle ad nauseum, over and over.
Thank you. Yo, man, thank you for the time today, and can't wait to hop on again and continue the discussion. I want to pick up right where we left off, and once again, I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks so much. Good talking to you.
All right, thank you, sir.